In the Locker Room with Tom and Stan. From the new co-op, East Hampton Vinyl, Joseph Seferati, coach. And from the Middlesex Chamber of Commerce, Brian O'Connor, talk about ticket specials for area football games.
Good evening. Welcome to In the Locker Room with Tom and Stan. I'm Tom.
I'm Stan. We're here from the Cromwell Knights of Columbus Hall. And, Tom, who would think 4 years ago you kind of came up with the idea of doing a football show, and we started putting it together. The Hall of Fame in Middletown was gracious enough to open their doors to us, and we started out with a couple of high school coaches in the area coming in, telling us what's happening. 4 years later, here we are, where we have their area high school coaches who have graciously come back year in and year out. We're doing a great job at Wesleyan. They have a new coach now. Sports writers, we've been very fortunate. We have Tom Yance from the Hartford Courant with his Fab 15 and his polls. Jim Bransfield with the Monday Morning Muse that he has out there. And Desmond O'Connor, who's a beat writer for the Hartford Courant for UConn.
Going back a few years, let's not forget Hal Levy.
That's right, Hal Levy. He was the first one to come on, and
I knew everything. He invented the playoffs in Connecticut.
He did, right?
He knew all about high school football, and we have, physical therapists come in and talk about sports injuries. We even have, we're even friendly with the referees now.
Yeah.
Unlike the old coaching days,
No.
They were sometimes the enemy. Except at home games.
Yeah.
Home games.
So,
But yeah, we're starting our fourth year. This, as we tape tonight, is the week before Labor Day. And on Labor Day weekend, UConn, its first local team to kick off the season. And then in following weeks, the high schools and the other colleges kick in. So football's in the air.
that's right. One way I know it, last year we had fantasy footballers on from Cromwell, the Court Street Warriors or whatever they were. I think they take this too seriously. You see them out there working out, they're jumping rope, they're doing sprints. I said, what's that got to do with fantasy football? But I mean,
Wow.
God, I mean, that must be a heck of a draft to be in there.
And one event that hasn't been held in this area that I recall in a while is our upcoming kickoff 2010 Coaches Night here at the Knights of Columbus Hall in Cromwell on Thursday, September 9th, with all the area high school coaches. Mike Whalen, the head football coach from Wesleyan, and hopefully some of our friends from the Hartford Colonials will come over, and a couple of those sports writers.
Yeah, well, right now we have confirmed with us Jim Bransfield and Tom Yance to kind of host it for us, introduce the coaches when they get up there to talk. We'll have a speaking program. The doors for the Knights of Columbus will open at 6:30, and the speaking program will open up at 7:30. Give the coaches time to get off the field, take a quick shower, make them look pretty, and they'll be up here. So it's it's going to be a great night. We've attended these in other cities throughout the state, and normally they get sellouts on these, anywhere from 150 to 350 people, depending on the area. So I think with the vicinity we have here, with Middletown, Xavier, Cromwell, Vinyl East Hampton this year, Vinyl hooked up at East Hampton, so that's going to be a great co-op, and we have the coach coming up later on to talk about that. And Coggenshaw, who was part of the co-op originally, now is on their own, and Coach Bosey is there working with that program. So we've added a new set of teams here, and it looks like it's going to be an exciting year.
So tickets for Coaches Night are available by calling myself, Stan, or Alan Schumann.
The names and numbers will be on the screen just a little bit. So, I mean, it's out there. It's a chance for you to meet the coaches firsthand. They'll get up. They'll probably give them airtime for about a 5 to 8 minute presentation about the team, talk about their personnel, their league, what their expectations are this year.
And maybe a few questions and answers from the crowd. But it'll be fun. And any local football fans, it's a must attend.
Yeah, especially I know Tom Yance always has to say on his Fab 15, he's always getting emails from everybody. Geez, how come this person wasn't in there? How come that person's not in there? Well, now you have a chance to come in and ask Tom about it. And sometimes, obviously, Jim Bransfield has a few poignant comments to say week in and week out. So if you have anything to talk about Jim, I'm sure he'll be glad to answer your questions for you.
So, why don't we move on with the show?
Okay.
We have a couple of interesting guests tonight.
And we'll be right back after this short break. Welcome back. With us now we have the new coach of the newly formed, or not, well, newly reorganized Vinyl team, but the host team is East Hampton, so it's the East Hampton Vinyl team. Joe Seferati, how you doing, Joe? How's it going?
Good, Stan.
Glad to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Geez, looks
Thank
like you
you
just
for
got
having
off the
me.
field.
I did.
That's great. So, how is it, Joe, out there on the field with the kids? A co-op team, and it's not as it was previously where they were a couple miles on the road. You're about, what, 15, 20 miles maybe apart the furthest?
The schools are about 13 miles
Okay.
apart, but you've got the traffic with the Portland Bridge
Yeah.
and the old bus situation with co-ops that I'm sure everybody that's heard of co-ops is familiar with.
Yeah.
And this is the second go-around with a co-op for me. I founded the co-op with St. Paul when I was the head coach of St. Paul with Goodwin Tech.
Oh, okay.
So
That's a couple years back.
yeah, that's going back to 2000, as a matter of fact. And, it worked out well there. And, co-ops are unique. It's a little bit of a different situation where you've got to mold kids from both schools into one team and make them believe that they're one team, one unit, and they're not two separate schools. And I think that's the first goal. Once you accomplish that, everything else kind of starts to fall into place.
That's good. All right, Joe, why don't you kind of give us a little background about yourself, how long you've been coaching, where have you coached, so forth, so on.
Well, believe it or not, I started coaching way back in the early 80s under John Ludko at Newington High. And that's where I went to school, Newington High School. And I started out coaching the freshmen and helping out with the junior varsity. And at the time, I was a police officer. I retired after 20 years now and went on to teaching. But at the time, I was a police officer working the midnight shift, and John needed some help with his freshmen, and he asked me if I wanted to give him a hand, and I said sure. So I started helping out with the freshmen and really took a liking to it, and decided I wanted to stay with it. And actually, that's what led me to go into my teaching career too, was coaching. And I coached at Newington from a long time, 1983 to 1996.
Wow.
So you're looking at about 15 years. And I moved my way up the ladder there from the freshman to junior varsity, then became the offensive coordinator in 88. And I was with John from 88 right through 96 running his offense, which is the offense that I've always took with me wherever I went after, the Delaware Wing T. It's an offense I love to run, and it's very comparable to kids that are starting in new programs and things like that. There's a lot of misdirection with it, and it's easily comprehended by kids that may not have that much of an extensive football background.
Right.
And then from Newington, I went up with Tony Benito to Fermi for a couple years and helped him and ran his defense up there. And then I got the head job at St. Paul in '99, and we were by ourselves, and we were obviously down in numbers, and it was a tough situation in the old Nutmeg League going up against teams like Berlin and Middletown and Northwest Catholic and teams like that. So we decided we had to co-op, and East Catholic was co-oping with Cheney Tech at the time. So we said, why not co-op with another tech school? So we ended up co-oping with Goodwin Tech, and worked out great. And I was with St. Paul until 2003, and then I moved on to Buckley. Became the head coach at Buckley because I had retired from the police department and got my teaching certification. And my first teaching job was in Hartford. So Buckley opened up, and right away they asked me, were you interested? And I really didn't want to leave St. Paul with Goodwin Tech. We had a really good gig going there, but I figured you're better off to coach and teach in the same system. So I put in for the Buckley job and got it. And I was there 3 years as the head coach. And after that, I thought it was time to take a little break. And so I took a little break after that for a couple of years, and Dave Curtis, the athletic director at Vinyl, had been mentioning to me that there may be a split with Cognachog going on their own. So I got the teaching job at Vinyl where I'm teaching phys ed with Dave. And, he said, would you be interested? And I said, yeah, I'd like to get back into it. And once we heard that Cognachog was definitely going on their own, Dave made some calls, and East Hampton said that they were interested in co-oping, and we knew we had to go co-op. We really couldn't go on our own. And, East Hampton said yes, and I put in for the position and was hired.
That's great. So I have one question. Which job is more hazardous?
No, I'll tell you, being a cop for 20 years it had its moments, but I enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I did it, and I think that background has helped me in the coaching field too.
Sure, I would think so. Okay, so you heard about this position, and you were obviously appointed to the job. Now, how do you go about? You mentioned it briefly. How do you go about building a program with the logistics involved? How's that going to work, first of all?
Well, what we did, we set up a meeting with East Hampton right away, and they had already established a booster club at East Hampton to start football in their town, which they had going for a year and a half, 2 years, and they had raised a significant amount of money. So that played a big part in it. Because things that we thought we might have to do to get equipment and, officials, transportation, everything else, they had already planned ahead for, which solved a lot of problems, and they were very proactive, and it helped a lot before these things arose. What they did is their facilities were not set up to host an actual football practice and games and everything else because of their extensive other sports, and their schedules were already set. So they asked, they said, we'll be the host school because the Pequog League wanted East Hampton to be the host school. For what reasons, I don't know, but that's the way it was told to me. So they said, we'll be the host school, but, can we use Vinyl's facilities? And, with the meeting with the administration with Vinyl, everybody said, well, sure, we've hosted Vinyl with Cognachog, where, everything's here already. We have the practice field. We have the storage areas, we have the locker rooms, and, logistically, yes. And so the next problem, obviously, was transportation. How are we going to get the kids from East Hampton to Vinyl? And, they said, well, get a bus. And I said, that's the way to do it. So that's what they do. School gets out, they get on the bus. They got about a 20-minute break when school gets out in East Hampton. They get on the bus, and they head over to Vinyl Tech. And, we kind of had a dry run for spring practice. We went to 2 weeks of spring this year. It was my choice, and I felt that although I do like the new idea with starting 4 days early in August and not doing spring because you have kids still involved in state track meets and everything else, and sometimes baseball, if you make the tournaments, that's still going on, and the conflicts with other sports. But for this year, my thought was that with the new co-op, it'd be a great opportunity for 10 practice days for the kids to start to get to know each other, rather than starting just 4 days early. And, we knew we were going to do some weight training and working out during the summer, but we still figured that the 10 days would be to our advantage to start putting this co-op together. So we did, and it was a dry run for what we're doing now. We had them bust over, all the logistics had to be worked out, and, timing-wise, it worked out well. They ended up getting to Vinyl like 3:10, 3:15, which wasn't too bad. Because, my coaching staff, I'm the only one on campus at Vinyl. My other guys are all commuting in, and there are guys that have been with me for a long time, which I can get into in a minute. But anyway, it worked out, very well, and we're on the practice field by 3:35, 3:40, and we'll go for our 2 hours, 2 hours and 15 minutes. And, the bus leaves to head back to East Hampton around 6 o'clock, 10 after 6. So so far it seems to work out pretty well. We had a great 2 weeks of spring. We did a blue-white game on the last day. We picked teams, and kids had a ball with it. We ran some of our basic wing T plays, which is the offense we're running, and we set up a basic 4-3 defense on both sides, and we put the ball on the 25-yard line, and in fact, the spring game ended up in a 14-14 tie. The kids were all excited. So I thought back to when I was with Newington, and we were in a tie game in the States, and we went to the Kansas tiebreaker. So I said, all right, let's do the Kansas tiebreaker. We'll put the ball on the 25, 1st and 10. Well, don't you think both the blue team scores and the